Good evening. So my good friend and my brother Scott here said, actually, when you do howdy, it's not just howdy. It has to be howdy. So, so I had to do that. And is that better? Good. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. For those of you who are guests tonight, thank you for choosing us and being with us tonight. You are in for a great treat. This has been an amazing series that we've been going through here at Walnut Street. So I just lost my sister. Sorry. I just lost my sister on Monday, and Deandra and I were driving here tonight, and there's a song by Hillsong United. It's called New Wine, and what this song talks about is that as Jesus performed a miracle of creating this new wine at this wedding ceremony, there is crushing and there's pressing in order for you to have new wine. And this song's what it talks about is that in life we have things that really crushes and presses us. But if we hang in there, something beautiful is going to come. So, and that's the same thing I've thought about with this song. It's that back home, I've been to a gold mine, and at a gold mine, it's an awful place to be. There's huge machines going on, and people are just doing really hard work and dirty, but the process, it's so nasty. But whenever the gold gets at the end of the process, it's so beautiful. It's one of the most prized stones on earth. But the process is not beautiful at all. The same thing with diamonds. So my whole point tonight is that to all of you moms out there, as I've been talking to my mom every day since I lost my sister, she said, Archie, it's my duty to be your mother. I don't answer to you, I answer to God. And I said, Mom, I get it. I get it why you were tough at me. I get it why you were tough at me and my siblings. She said, yeah, and I am not going to stop. Yeah, even when I'm mourning my sister, your sister right now and my daughter, I'm not going to stop. I'm going to keep pushing you because I don't answer to you, I answer to God. And I was like, wow. As most of you have told you, my mom, she's one of those women that would say, grew up telling me, I am not your friend and I'll never be your friend. And she said, I'm not joking. I am not one and I will never be one. I am your mother with a capital M. So to all of you parents in this building tonight, thank you all so much for what you do. I know my brother Steve is going to help us get closer to God with what he has studied. Thank you for all that you do. Because in order for so many young people in this church to be where they are, in order for us, Brian, to be the preacher he is, he came through a mother. So thank you so much for all that you do. Please don't stop. And don't feel guilty of being a mom. Embrace it, enjoy it, and celebrate it. And for us, kids, youngsters, most of you have a cell phone. You got a cell phone how old are you? 16, 15. I never knew what a cell phone was until I was 18 years old. Most of you, I'm going to pick up on you because I love you. You have a say on where you go to eat on Sundays. Oh my gosh. You have it mad. In our house, you eat what mother has provided on the table. So, Brother Steve, thank you so much for your sermon tonight. I know God is going to speak through you. Thank you for being here. Brother Steve, help us to get close to God. Thank you.
Stand, please.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for loving us, for the gift of your Son, for making all things possible. Father, right now we remember parents particularly. We lift up parents right now, Father, for moms and dads. We just pray for wisdom and strength, for encouragement. Father, please help us as parents to be the parents you would have us be. It's in Christ's name we pray. Amen.
We sing this song, so we're third grade now, in the class. God is a fountain with 10,000 blessings flow. To Him my life, my health and friends, and every good I owe. The comforting fortify me, neither great nor small. He is the source of fresh delight, my portion and my all. He fills my heart with joy, my lips attunes for praise, and to His glory I'll devote the remnant of my days.
Good evening, everyone. Parenting, boy howdy. I see a lot of people here that were here last week, and I'm almost ready. Give me just a second. See a few visitors, too. I want to share with you where I'm coming from as a recovering parent. And I was a best parent ever, and then like most of you, I had children, and things changed. So I do want to, a lot of funny jokes out of this. I do want to share with you really where I was at one point in my parenting. And let me just get set up here so I can not be distracted. Here we go. At one point, we had, I think, my memory is sometimes questionable, but I think we had 3 teenagers and 1 almost teenager in the house. And one of my children was going through counseling, and at a certain point, the counseling kind of fell apart. And so the following week was coming up, and Anita and I both determined that this child was probably not going to counseling that day or ever again. So we decided it'd be good for me just to go down there during the appointed time and say thank you for working with them, and we're sorry we kind of dropped the ball on this. And so said my piece. He said, well, why don't you sit down and let's talk. What's on your heart? And so I sat down and I thought about it. And I know sometimes I say things that sound a little bit off for church settings, but here's what I said, and it's from my heart. In no area of my life have I had my rear end handed to me than in parenting. What I expected versus sometimes what I was able to accomplish were so far apart. And I don't know about some of you who've gone through this journey already, but I would go through these phases where I would get really motivated. I mean, I would come home from work sometimes at night, and all the kids would be asleep, and I would kind of peek into their room and see their sweet little faces, get just super appreciative of what God has blessed me with, and just think, wow, I got to do better. And I would read a book, I would listen to a speaker, I would get a plan together and start some big plan, and had some successes, but so often was just very shocked at how it didn't turn out. And so I'm just coming to you as someone who has raised 4 kids, got 4 adult children. I have a master's degree in marriage and family therapy. So what does that qualify me to do? Not much. It's just a degree. But I do want to share something with you just real honestly about what God has taught me. And I hope that this will be just super encouraging for you. And especially if you're in the middle of it, or for those of you who will someday be parents, just to really encourage you that this is a good process. From last week, just to clear up a few administrative items, at one point, we're going to have this menti.com that you can send in questions with, and I stated that last week we had a technical problem, and you're looking at him. Whether or not that has been fixed or not is up for debate, but I think it appears to be working. I sent myself 2 questions, and I answered them. It was awesome. So anyway, we only had 1 question and 1 comment. And so the question, if you asked that, if you're here tonight, that was a great question. It's very extensive. It probably wouldn't have fit into our time frame anyway, so just come to me or call me or contact me if you want to talk about that. I'd be glad to. Now, the comment I do want to talk about because, I was having one of those War and Peace weeks last week where everything was great and everything was horrible, and I was just a little bit off balance last Sunday night because of some things that I'd become aware of. And so someone in the audience sent this message to me, and it just made my week. I figured it out right after I got home Sunday night, so I'm just going to put it up there for you. Steve, keeping it 100. Ha! Yes, thank you, whoever you are. Thank you so much. That made my week. I needed that encouragement. Thank you so much. And also, the real Menti code, I replaced it. That is the actual one for tonight. Go to www.menti.com if you have a question tonight, and just put in the code 398039 and ask your question. I've got it up over here, and we will cover it at various time. And also, let's see here. I had to deal with Gary Spicer. If we go too long without a break, I intend to give us a little stand-up break here at some point. He's just going to stand up and walk out. If you see Gary get up and walk out, y'all just go. It's break time. That's a long time to sit if we do this whole thing tonight. Okay, so I want to talk about this again if you weren't here last week, and also just to reaffirm if you, is that there's a trend in our culture where we're tending to kind of attack each other, and sometimes us folks who are a bit older will kind of look at things going on in the younger generation, like, well, you younger kids just don't know how to, we need to stop that. We're all in this together. We're all on the same journey. We're all brothers and sisters in Christ, and we need to seek to understand why the things are happening that we see happening, and we need to make sure that we do understand what they're going through in order to help them. And then the same thing, the okay boomer trend, all this kind of things of insulting older people. We're easy targets. Yeah, we got it. Let's not do that. We're all in this together. And of course, if you're parenting in the middle of it tonight, I just really want to encourage you. I hope you come away from here with at least one thing, and I want to share one thing with you that I hope will be very encouraging. Now tonight, we're going to start in the parents' prayer and spend quite a bit of time in there. You'll look a little bit confused, the parents' prayer. Okay, it's also called the Lord's Prayer. So if you want to turn over to Matthew chapter 6, just want to share something with you. But I want to start with something, kind of looking back at what I was sharing with you about my situation at a certain point in parenting where I was rather discouraged, very discouraged. I contend we serve an active and living God. He teaches us daily if we're willing to listen. And we had this thing happen in my house one time. My oldest daughter, Rachel, I think when she was 12 or 13, she decided one of my birthdays to make me a chocolate cake from scratch. She got our old Betty Crocker cookbook, and she just, got the chocolate squares. I mean, it was incredible. It was so much better than a box cake, you know what I mean? I mean, when someone just makes it from scratch. So, fantastic. It looked pretty good, too, for a first-time effort. And the next year, my birthday came around again, and she said, well, what kind of cake do you want? And I'm going, well, I would kind of like that same cake again. And so she went to the kitchen. I was home that day, and she starts making this cake. And I was in and out of the kitchen, and at a certain point I could tell she was upset. Things weren't going well. Something happened with the chocolate, and we think it got a little too cool before we mixed it in with the flour and the sugar, or she mixed it in. And so it didn't exactly blend right, so it was kind of like little speckles in a semi-white cake. It was weird. It just didn't do right. But, she cooked them, and they came out, and I said, it's not a big deal. We're going to put icing on it. It's got all this. It's going to taste the same. So she turns them onto the cooling rack, and they just completely completely tore apart. I mean, I'm talking little fragments it just completely fell apart into a big lump of pieces. And she was just, do we do this over again? And I was just thinking, wow, my daughter made this for me because she loves me and she wanted to. She put her best into it. It didn't turn out like the picture in the cookbook. It didn't turn out like the picture in her head. And she's kind of looking at this and thinking, well, do we have to go through this? We didn't have all the ingredients. We'd have to go back to the store. And I'm sitting there thinking, wow, I love this cake. I said, let's eat it. And we scraped it into a big plastic bowl, and we put candles in it. And if you were to ask my family, anyone in there, what's the most memorable cake we ever had, it would probably be the bowl cake. I loved it, because my daughter did that for me out of love. And the one thing I want to say to you as parents, if you are already a parent and if you've had some parenting failures like I have, is that our Father didn't give us this blessing. And you think about it, if you've ever read the book of Jeremiah 1, God is talking to Jeremiah, and he says something that's just absolutely amazing. He says, before I placed you in your mother's womb, I knew you. He already knows us before we're born, and he entrusts the care of one of these precious fellow brothers or sisters to us for a short time. Wow, what a blessing, Does he expect perfection? I'm doing this because you just rock at being a parent. Oh, yeah. Does he see our heart? Anita and I have shared so many times, things didn't always turn out the way that we had hoped, but we did the best that we could all the time. Some days my best wasn't as good as at other times. Could I do it better now? I know more, but I don't have the energy I used to have. I don't know. I really don't know. But I did the best I could for God. I had a great time. I really enjoyed his children. There was a lot of suffering. There was a lot of learning. But at some point, I gave him the little parenting cake in a bowl. I consider that he is pleased. It's a beautiful thing. So let's really enjoy this process. And then what I want to talk about with this parent's prayer, I had a completely different show prepared, slides, talk, and everything until Thursday night when I was laying in bed going to sleep, and I just really felt this is not where we need to go. And so I want to share something with you. This is actually something that Anita and I learned recently. We went to a Christian leadership conference, and Andy Stanley adapted the Lord's Prayer to those who were in Christian leadership, and it was just beautiful and powerful. And as I was laying in bed that night thinking about what we really needed, what I wanted to accomplish, what I felt I could have used most in this, if you're parenting or if someday you're going to be parents, and I sure hope that you get that joy. Or if you have people who have kids and you're going to encourage them, I pray that this will encourage you. And this will be something that if you learn to do this, you can do it every day, you can do it once a week, once a month, whenever you need to, but it can really help us to understand what God intends for us to do in our parenting. It can help us to understand how to be better children of parents, because I think probably all of us are children of parents, right? Happens to all of us. We're all parents, and at some point we're all children. Sometimes we get the blessing of being parents as well. So we're going to walk through this together and listen with your heart. The Lord's Prayer, the parent's prayer, starts in Matthew chapter 6, verse 9. Jesus has got a lot of people around him, including his closest followers, and he says this, "Pray then like this, Our Father." And you think about this, is that there are all sorts of people around him. This is not just the Jewish people. We find from the previous verses before this Sermon on the Mount starts that there were people from all over. Israel is a trade route, and people have been watching him heal people, cast out demons. Amazing. He's teaching, and whenever he tells them, this is how you should pray, he says, say, Our Father. What's the significance of that? Kind of like we said, if you were here last week about being married, is that my wife is not just my wife, she's also my sister in Christ. If you're married, you have a husband, that your husband's also your brother. We're all in this together. And so whenever we are to pray understanding that this is our Father. It's also my children's Father. And also, that means what? He's also my parent. He's parenting me. And have you considered the possibility that one of the reasons that he allows us this blessed privilege of taking one of his children into our hearts and our homes and trying to guide them along the way is not because he's looking for us to do some great job so he can say, oh yeah, you did that right, but that he still loves us so much that he wants to teach us something about what he does every day with us. He's still growing us. Sorry, got behind there. Our Father. Our children, start out small. They need a lot from us, and then they start growing. And then at some point, they become what I call young adults, which these over here are the young adults. Okay, they're probably 12, 13-ish and above. We'll talk a little bit more about that later if we have the time. But increasingly, it's very much like a relay race. At first, we're having to carry them. Then they kind of start learning to run slowly. At some point, we're kind of showing them how to run, how to pick up your speed, how to have better technique, spiritually speaking. And at some point, we're going to hope to hand off that baton, and they're going to run off and leave us. And we kind of go towards the end of life there. Our Father. Just a reminder that we're all being parented. It's not about you doing the right job. I've had more than one young mother come to me in tears just saying, I'm trying so hard, but I can't do it right. I'm going, will you let God parent you? Just do the best you can. Love your child. Our Father. And just as a reminder, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Something to consider, and I'll just be honest with you, I don't know about the rest of you, but there were times, much as in other times in my life, I've struggled with pride where I was trying to do what I was going to do with my children so that some of you would think that I was a great dad. I'm hoping that kid will reflect well on me and you go, wow, that's Steve Moore. He's a great parent. Look at how his kids turned out. Is that really the motivation we should have? Can this prayer before God remind us that I really want people to think much of God because of what he sees in my parenting and what he sees in my child? wow, hallowed be your name, Father, not my name. This isn't about me. If you look ahead, if you're in Matthew, if not, just listen to this. I shared this in my class. This is also something that Anita and I heard at the conference, but it really struck me pretty hard. Hallowed be your name. If you step ahead to, still in chapter 6, but Jesus is talking to these people. Imagine, if you will, that you're one of Jesus's followers, one of his top disciples. You've been with him the whole time. You're one of the apostles, or you're one of the women who's been following him. And so he's talking, you're listening, but then all of a sudden he says these words. He says, no one can. No one can. Whoa. That sounds important, doesn't it? Okay, you're starting to consider, people are already starting to look at this person, Jesus, and they're starting to go, wow, could this be the Messiah? Could this be the one who was prophesied so long ago? And I'm listening to him, I'm following him, I'm seeing him do miracles. No other man can do this. He's casting out demons. And then he's talking, and I'm going, And then he says, no one can. You think it'd get your attention? I want to hear this. What does he say? No one can serve two masters. Are we going to serve our own pride? Are we going to parent so that we look good? Are we going to parent, as Archie was saying, like his mother says, to God? I do this for God. Sometimes, I know in my case, I know at times I embarrassed my mother, disappointed her, crushed her. I don't know. She just kept loving me. She wasn't trying to glorify herself, apparently. Else she would have kicked me out of the house. We can't serve two masters. You know, our children at times, they've got to, our children are just, they're our brothers and sisters in Christ at a different phase of life. We're helping to help them learn to walk with God. So sometimes they're going to do things that some people are going to go, man, what a bad parent you are. Can't believe you let them do that. Hey, just be concerned with pleasing God. Let's continue. Yeah, I love this picture. It's just a reminder to me. I remember my little girls sometimes and my little boy would get into my flight boots from my military uniform, and it would come up to here. It's like it is so cute. But it's also kind of a reminder that what we're doing, God is giving us someone he wants to be a kingdom warrior someday. They are trying to step into our shoes. We are raising not to our purposes, not because I'm not trying to raise someone who will be an airline pilot and please me. I'm trying to raise someone who God created for a purpose, his purpose in his kingdom. And part of my job as a parent is to discover what that is. What is my child's, to help them discover what is my child's kingdom purpose. Back to the story of Jeremiah. Jeremiah, apparently, if you look at some of the words that are said to Jeremiah, at one point, God kind of says, hey, I knew you from before the time I put you in the womb, and I'm sending you to these people who are in rebellion to me, Israel. God already has a purpose for that young person right there. And Jeremiah says, whoa, I'm just a youth. I don't know how to speak. And God says, do not say you are just a youth. The Bible's pretty clear. We're going to talk about this a little bit later, but let's not necessarily buy into our society's concept of, oh, well, you're just a young person. You're an adolescent. That's adolescence. If you haven't studied the history of that, you need to. It's a bad concept. We need to, as parents, and we need to, as growing young people, consider what it is, what are the unique talents that God gave me, what are the desires he gave me, and I need to pursue those things as I pursue God and pursue the purpose that he has made me for. His kingdom come, and as parents, not what I want for my child necessarily, but what does God want for my child? Going on. Your will be done. Oh boy, this one's hard. We all likely know someone, and maybe you have, as a parent, a child who kind of went down a bad path and maybe is still there. It's a killer. It hurts. And this is where it comes in. And I like to illustrate it from a story I heard years ago at a conference, but there was two families that went to the beach, good friends. The moms and dads are sitting on the beach watching the kids out playing in the ocean. One of the little boys got out a little bit further, and all of a sudden they saw him struggling. He was getting pulled under by a riptide. So the dad of that boy runs high speed, swims out there, and gets the boy just as he is being pulled under, probably for the last time, and is able to, as he dives under, to kind of throw him backwards over his back, and the kid is able to come up, get some air, and swim back. But in the meantime, the dad is pushed to the bottom, and he's being held there by this tide or this flow of water. He cannot get up. And so he says he's just being pinned to the bottom, and finally he gives up. He sucks in the water. And he says just as he's about to lose consciousness, he feels almost like he's being catapulted off the bottom. Whatever it was stopped. The other dad, in the meantime, has swam out there, grabs him, takes him to the shore, gives him CPR, gets the water out of the lungs, revives him. And so they're laying there on the beach just panting, gasping for breath. And the dad who almost drowned said, "God sure is good." And the other dad is laying there also, and he says, "Yep, and he'd be good if you were still on the bottom of the ocean." And the point that I'm making is do we understand that our plans for our children, our hopes and dreams for our children, may not be what God needs them to do? We have a number of people here who could tell some pretty amazing stories about the path that they went down before God brought them back and the purpose that God had in that. I have my own story. Part of the reason that I am as strong and as devoted to God as I am is because of some of those bad things that I ventured off into. I would not have been the same strength in my love towards God had it not been for those hard times and for those bad decisions. We need to be reminded sometimes by praying through this prayer, I think is very helpful, that sometimes, if you're parenting, your child may take a path that you see as very destructive. They shouldn't go there. You may have to cut them off or whatever, but at the same time, you have to show them, and you have to truly do this, is let God work through them and understand that He loves them more than you ever could. Thy will be done, not mine. It's not a failure on your part if your kid goes off in the wrong direction. They have the same freedom to choose that God gave you and I. And God gave us a lot of autonomy. He gives us the Word, He gives us evidence of Himself, but He doesn't hold a gun to our head and force us to follow. And you think about the rich young ruler comes to Jesus. He's really a doer, man. He is really doing God's will really well. And Jesus says, you're lacking one thing. Sell all you have, follow me. You need to learn to trust me instead of your own wealth and your own abilities. And rich young ruler says, I can't do that. And God doesn't strike him down with a lightning bolt. He doesn't force him to come along. Just says he was sad. We need to follow that example. Thy will be done, not mine. Not the parents. Whew, boy, howdy. This one, give us this day. I loved planning for my kids and their entire future, and the whole, every time I got a plan together on how to better parent our kids, it was a long-term plan. It beat the communist 5-year planning system. It was going to result in excellent kids, And also, when my kids are going through trouble, I want the solution. Just a reminder here, all we really need to walk in faith is just, God, give me this day enough light to see just the next step ahead. If we start looking ahead all the way, what could happen if this happens, if this happens, if this happens, instead of just going, okay, Lord, I'm scared, I'm hurting, what should I do in this moment, in this day? It goes so much better if we just trust God and step into it. I found myself very fearful at times of just stepping into my kid's life and say, what's going on with you? Because I was stepping ahead going, wow, what if they don't like my interference? What if they reject me? And what if? Just how about, God, what's the next step? Just the next loving thing to do. Give us this day. Forgive us as we have. probably one of the hardest things is forgiving ourselves. You will make mistakes. I think most of us make some parenting mistakes. Definitely the longest apologies I've ever made have been to my children. I've had some record-setting apology sessions. It really, and sometimes, it's really strange because I don't know about the rest of you. I found parenting to be very consuming. I love to ask young mothers, so how are your hobbies going, And I try not to be too close because you can just see the anger. My hobby's smacking you. It's like, it's going great. So consuming. And there was this one time when I could tell my son was angry with me. He was hurt, he was quiet, he wouldn't respond. And so I said, well, I had an event I could take him to with work, and so I took him on kind of an evening. We're driving to Hendersonville that night and to do a little event. And I finally just said, I know something's wrong. What is it? And he just said, I never do anything right. Everything I do, you just pick on me. You're always critical. I just never measure up in your eyes. And my first response was, how dare you? Do you know how hard I'm working? Do you know how hard this is being a parent? I do all sorts of things for you. And then I started thinking about it, though, just in that phase of parent. We had 4 kids at that time. I was working, I think I was down to 1 job at that time. I usually had 2. And we're trying to run the house. And so what I tended to do was, you see him doing something. I only noticed him mainly when he was doing something wrong, and so I was correcting him. Hey, stop doing that. Stop hitting your sister. Stop stealing this. Stop eating out of the cookies. All the cookies. Just continual correction, and it wasn't really intentional, but from his viewpoint, I was entirely corrective and negative and critical. And so I was able just to say, wow, I am so sorry. Please forgive me. I lose perspective sometimes. Let's forgive them, but let's also forgive ourselves. Let's ask for forgiveness. It's very important to do that, to keep things going. It's perfectly okay, and it's certainly normal to ask your children for forgiveness. And this next one, lead us not into temptation. Oh, wow. This is, I think, so often there's a temptation I know that I felt, and I've seen other parents who finally just kind of go, you know what, I'm going to hand these kids off. I'm going to let the school take care of it, let the church take care of it, because I can't do this. But once again, I think that the big picture here that God is really trying to teach us, we can get so much insight into where His heart is with us sometimes, is just to keep on making that bowl cake. It's not perfect. Just keep loving your children. Keep trying. Keep coming to Him. One of the things that I've shared with my Sunday morning class, one of the reasons that I became very disciplined at morning, what we call armor up time, meeting with God every morning, is because in this busy phase of raising kids and trying to be a good husband and trying to be a good pilot and trying to be a good church member, is that I got to the point where I felt so completely unworthy and incapable and like a total failure that I was up every morning going, God, please give me something just to make it through this day. That sense of, wow, this is more than I can do, drove me to seek God's face every morning. It wasn't that I didn't need the extra sleep, because you know how tired you get when you've got multiple kids, but I had to get up early and I had to go meet with Him just for a brief time and get into His Word and just say, God, give me something. I can't do this. Don't give up. Don't give up. Oh yeah, deliver us from evil. We are not living on a playground, we're living on a battleground. Satan is always attacking us. Something that Anita and I have talked about, I've shared with a number of you, is that, if Satan can take down one of our families, boy, it just rocks people's faith in the church. We need to understand that there is a war against us passing on our faith to our children. There is a war against us trying to get us just to become faithless, saying, wow, God, I've tried all this and my child isn't doing what I expected. Instead of saying, God loves my child more than I do. My child may not be going the way I or God wants him to go right now, but maybe God has a purpose in this. We need to be aware that we are under attack. We need to continually come before God and say, deliver us from evil, protect us. There is this spiritual reality that I mentioned this morning that Elisha prayed that his servant would see, that we are surrounded by the forces of God, that our Father is the He is the commander of the armies that will win. So this is an awesome thing that we can do, is just invoke the Father and say, wow, deliver us from evil. Part 2. How are we doing on time? I'm going to check our questions here. If you would like to stand up just for a minute, I'm going to check our questions. If you need to take a quick break or get water or whatever, please do. I'll be your Apple Watch for the day. Time to stand. We'll start back in about 5 minutes or so if you want to take a quick break. All right, I think we're mostly back. We have one question so far, a great question. Do you think parenting is harder today because of kids thinking about school shootings and violence? That is definitely something, I think for a lot of us who are older, never dreamed of someone walking in and just shooting for the sake of shooting. It's got to impact your mental state. And this is probably a good segue into what I was going to talk about in this time anyway. Statistically, I am told, you can look at this is the safest time to be a kid ever. And it doesn't seem that way because, when did we used to get news, old people, like myself? It came on at 5 or 5:30 or 6, and then maybe in the mornings if you were awake. When do we get news now? I mean, everything is right in your face all the time. And so we're just continually hyper aware of everything that happens all around the world, especially in our whole country. And so, but yeah, it has a huge impact, I think, on our young people. And got to see a really interesting speaker named Tim Elmore. He wrote a book about Meet Generation Z, and he talks about the cycles that we go through. For instance, I'm either a late boomer or an early Xer, I don't know. It depends upon which category you look at, but my generation generally was considered to be a very fearful generation. We were born and grew up during the Vietnam War, which I remember was very terrifying. They were drafting people, and I'm an 8-year-old boy, and I'm worried about getting drafted. It's like, how long did I think this war was going to go on? But we had this war where they were bringing in color video every night from these young men being killed, and it was terrifying. And so yeah, that's definitely an issue, I think, for parenting, is talking about, first of all, statistically, is it likely to happen? No, And we're going to talk about something else here. Let's just go ahead and get into it. I shared this. Let me see who's here tonight and my young adult friends over here. I'm not sure. I don't see Drew and Allison here. I wanted to apologize if they had to hear this again. Here's the question. Let's just answer it internally. It could get really loud in here. Is it a good idea to send a 10-year-old boy into war? No. How about 12? Is 12 better? Okay. And we talked about, I asked this of a homeschool group the other day, and they gave some very good reasons why it would not be a good idea, but I said, I want to tell you about a guy named David. David, when he was 9 years old, his father, who was a ship captain, let him sign on to a warship, the USS Essex. David, when he was about 10, saw his first man killed in a battle. And he says at first it really just stopped him in his tracks. It stunned him, and then he started looking around going, oh, that's happening all around me, so I guess I better get back to my job. Some short time later, he was working for, if you think about those old tall ships, he was on one of those with the multiple mast, and they had cannon out each side. So he was working on the port side, which is the left side, I think, with the gun captain in a battle. And then there was also a gun captain on the right side in the battle. And so he was working for the port side gun captain, and the gun captain said to young David, go below and get some primers for the cannon. So he starts down the stairway. At the same time, the gun captain on the right side took an 18-pound shell to the head, knocked his head off, and this man's decapitated body knocked over and fell down the stairway on top of David. Knocked him to the floor. So obviously he was shocked. He scrambles out from underneath, runs back up the stairs. The gun captain, who sent him down, looks at him and sees this 10-year-old covered in blood, and he says, are you hurt? And David said, I don't think so. And he goes, then where are my primers? And so, oh yeah. So he went back down and he got the primers. It gets better. When he was 12, the Essex captured 2 British ships in battle. And of course, in that time, I believe they were off the west coast of South America. So they had sailed around the Horn of South America. And they captured 2 ships. When you did that, if they were in decent shape, you would sell them back, refit them, and use them, because it took a while to build a ship by hand and with the tools of the day. So they put a skeleton crew of Americans onto this ship, and then they used the captured British crew as the primary crew members. And they put a guy named David in charge as captain of that ship, of one of the ships. 12 years old, and he's captaining a ship in war with an adult captured British crew. At one point, the British captain who had been captured, they had allowed him to keep his pistols as a means of respect. And so the British captain got a little bit irritated at being ordered about by a 12-year-old. And he said, I'm going below to get my pistols and I'm going to take you out. And so Captain David, 12 years old, sent message by way of a steward, said, if you show yourself on top of the deck again, we will kill you. And the British captain stayed below. 12 years old, David Farragut became an admiral. By the time he was 17, he was fighting pirates off the Barbary Coast. Sometime around age 18 or 19, he met an ambassador to the United States over there and said, you need a little more training in language, your speech. So sat down with him and trained him a little bit more with language and even a foreign language. Became an admiral, became in charge of the United States Navy. At 12 years old, he's captaining a ship. What are young people capable of? You think about David in the Bible. How old was he when he fought Goliath? We kind of have to speculate. We do know that when Goliath looked at him, and for that matter, when Saul looked at him, he's kind of like, you can't do this because you're a youth. In general, youth in Israel meant that you were below the age of 20 at least. But he was clearly below the age of 20 to Goliath. And so he goes in there and takes out a giant. What had he done before that when he was even younger? He fought a lion and a bear. He played harp for a king. Very accomplished young man. You think about how old was Mary. We talked about her some this morning. If she was following the traditions of the day, she was probably 13 to 15 when she became the mother of Jesus, the Savior of the world. If you look at the apostles, this is interesting too. There's just a few indications. This is deduction. It's not necessarily stated, but there comes a point where Jesus and Peter brings up we need to pay the temple tax, and they only paid it for 2 people. It was paid for men 20 years and older. So all the other apostles may have been under the age of 20. And furthermore, what was the tradition back then? What Jesus was doing was called the rabbinical tradition. That is usually at a certain point, a man who was studied in the law would take on students, and they would normally be 15, 14, 16 years old, and he would start discipling them. And so most likely the apostles who started this whole movement that we are a part of, this church of God, were your age. A lot of people today are familiar with Alexander Hamilton. During the retreat from New York, when the army of the Continental Army was almost destroyed, he was 20. You can just look over and over at what are young people capable of. We talk about the stress and how this can be so distressing. We look at a generation now, sometimes who the most anxious, depressed, lonely, suicidal, self-harming generation in the history of the United States, and we're going, how hard has it been compared to times past, and why has it changed? And it's interesting, I think one of the things when I asked the homeschoolers, I said, what changed? And one young man thought about it and he said, responsibilities. I'm going, yeah, and furthermore, what do adults expect of you as a young person? And he said, to do what we're told. I went, wow, yeah, probably so. And you're continually told to do what you're told. Is that really the healthiest thing for us to do? Our young people are so capable of so much if we will just trust them. And I think that's what I hear Bob and Alan say continually. They take them on trips. They give them a lot of autonomy. They tell them, we got to leave at this time. You need to do this. They do it. They're capable, very capable of doing so much more than our society expects. And as you kind of research some of this, the analysis of why people are anxious, depressed, suicidal, lonely, or whatever, there are people who kind of look at the obvious answer and say, oh, it's just the screens, it's the phones, it's the video games. There are other people going, we don't think so. And here's the reason why. If this is a pretty common, I don't know statistically how common it is, but it's a fairly common factor. If you suddenly have, say, a 35 to 45-year-old woman who develops a gambling addiction, what's the problem? The easy answer is she has a gambling problem. But what they determined is, and I've got a little bit of information here. I can actually read it to you from one of the studies. Here we go. Multiple studies have shown a relationship between the experience of trauma and pathological gambling in women. In one program treating pathological gambling, 60% of women were diagnosed with PTSD and other mental disorders arising from sexual abuse earlier in life. And so sometime around age 35, all of a sudden they're gambling. Here's what they call this. They call it the not good enough self. Resulting from childhood trauma and creating a sense of emptiness and deficiency within that primes the participants for later susceptibility to gambling's incremental, seductive, soothing, and intoxicating qualities that offer escape from the trauma burdened psyche, or in other words, you could just say the pain. And so what one group of researchers are considering as the problem today is that, kind of like the woman who's struggling with gambling, the problem isn't gambling. Yeah, we see young people on phones a lot. We see young people maybe playing video games a lot. We may see young people abusing alcohol, food, or whatever. Maybe just as that's the woman who's gambling, she doesn't have a gambling problem, she has a pain problem. Maybe they're having a pain problem too. And there's a theory of psychology that really seems to make sense to me based upon some experience that I had with young people, working with them in camp and other situations, also in my own upbringing, is that what people need to function, to flourish as human beings, and this is something called self-determination theory. I think it has a lot of biblical backing when you look at it. People need to have autonomy, which means the ability to pursue your own path. And when you think about this, does God give us autonomy? We already talked about that. He says, follow me, but he doesn't force us. He didn't make us little robots who had no choice. He gives us the dignity of choice and freedom. We need autonomy. And when we're raising kids, we've talked about this with a number of you, it needs to be age-appropriate autonomy. You know, they need to have an increasing amount of freedom to pursue what they perceive God is intending them to be and to develop those abilities. They need to have competence. They need to be able to do things well. You think back to David, what could he do at a young age? He could shepherd. He was really good with a sling. He's a musician and a poet. And then as he goes through life, God develops other competencies. We need to be able to do things well and to master certain things so that we are of value to society. You know, one of the great areas where we can provide some competence to young people occurs in our homes. And this is so funny sometimes. I would go on deployments with grown men in their 30s, and if we stayed out too long, someone would need to do laundry, and they would ruin their clothes because they didn't know how to do laundry in their 30s. What kind of a southern mama's boy are you, you know? Oh, and another one, dear new friend, had two brothers in my cabin, one of the rare years I did the senior boys, and we had to clean the bathhouse, the worst assignment ever on the last day. And so I had a couple of guys in there mopping, and so I said, hey, you two, in there mop. And they went, we don't know how to mop. Ooh, you need a mopping competency course, okay? What is your mama thinking? Yeah, home provides so many opportunities for competency. And then the final thing that people need to flourish, all people, are relationships. Deep, meaningful, trusting relationships where you are safe to share who you really are and what you're feeling. You know, we all need that. So going back to this, I think that the people who are saying that we need more autonomy, more competence, more relationships are also saying that one of the reasons why young people are struggling so much with tech, with video games, with any addictive subject is not because of this itself. It's because, it's really just because of the, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. It's really just because of the pain of not being able to do what they were really designed to do, that they don't have that freedom to pursue who they are meant to be. That every step of their life is controlled, and they are told where to go, when to go, all this kind of stuff. So one of the things that we got to work on as parents, and here's the main point that I was trying to make, is that what this is producing, we have become a child-centered society, and we have child-centered families, and we are protecting our kids to the point to where they have become what they said infantilized. We are extending childhood way into adulthood. We're not expecting them to take on the responsibilities that they are clearly capable of taking on. And so part of this, okay, dealing with potential danger, it's not something all adults do well either. You know, I have a friend, I was just talking about one of my friends in the Guard. We were flying in the second Gulf War, and it really wasn't terribly high stress most of the time, but he ended up claiming PTSD, getting a stressed dog, which got ran over. You know, it's taxpayer funded, by the way. And I'm just going, I mean, it really, I don't know. You learn to handle difficult situations. There were some tight moments, there were some scary things, but you learn to handle those things by handling them. by being able to handle them. You know, David Farrar got to a certain, it was traumatic, but he learned to deal with it. He learned to put it in its place in his life. So yeah, great question. I think we have some more here. Let me see here. By the way, David Pippin is watching us live. Hi, David. That message came across. I think that cell phones, texting is a huge family church problem because it comes between us and even takes our place. What are your thoughts? I agree completely. And this is kind of interesting. I've been studying this issue for about a year, and some of you have heard this. I apologize, but what I noticed in my life was that I took a little break. I was trying to write a book, and I wanted to get it done. Most authors want to be authors, never finish. So I decided I'm going to put this stuff aside, and I'm just going to focus on this. I'm not going to use any devices for at least 6 to 8 hours a day. And I was amazed. First of all, I finished a book in 6 weeks when I put away all those distractions. And so then that took me into the realm of saying, wow, this is really impacting me. So I kind of started a very structured program of, you might call it protocols of how to use social media, how to use email, how to use texting, how to use cleaned off my phone, just put down to essential apps. And Anita spoke in a very short time. We both noticed, first of all, is that we were having much deeper conversations. We felt much more connected. And this is something when we talk about those needs of the self-determination theory is that, yeah, these things can help us connect sometimes, and I've got people trying to connect with me right now, and but I need to be focused on you right now. There's an appropriate time and an appropriate way to use this, but yeah, I agree. We need to get this under control, and I was going to talk about this a little bit later, but this is such a great intro to it. There's a philosophy that you can adopt. Are we going to isolate our young adults from these things, technology, video games, whatever it is, or are we going to inoculate them? In other words, when they leave home, do you want them to go out into a world that's just selling and offering tech at every turn or whatever it is, and they've never had any dealings with it? How are they going to handle that? What we saw with our children, and we kind of wish we'd done it differently, especially with our first one, is that we really restricted television, we really restricted games and internet, and so once they get out, they just go full in. They're sleeping with devices because they've never really learned how to manage this in their own life. And so, yeah, I think we need to just continually have this discussion as parents, as coaches, where we just sit down and one author has recommended, and this is what he's doing with his children, is that he says, they kind of sit down maybe once a quarter and they say, okay, you like video games and you like this social media. How much of your time are you going to devote to that, and when is it going to be? Put it on your calendar, and then let's see how this works, and we'll come back later and review and see how it's doing. Are you connecting with your friends face-to-face? Are you connecting with your family face-to-face? Walk them through it. Initially I was kind of saying, yeah, don't get your kids a device. Now I'm kind of saying, well, really train them to use a device. So yeah, I agree. That's a great question. I think it does hurt, but it's something we all have to learn. And the thing that Anita and I have noticed going out to eat since I've gotten unhooked from this stuff, I'm not as addicted as I was. I've got it under control, is that when you sit in a restaurant or you go anywhere and you start looking, younger generations don't have the exclusive market on being distracted. People my age, wow, we see people, they're dressed up, they're on a date, and they're just sitting there, I'm going, why get dressed up? Why go anywhere? I don't know. It's just everyone. This is a big problem for everyone. And so once again, as a parent, make sure that if you're trying to get your children or your young people to do something, make sure that you're modeling it. I hear from a lot of kids, I can't get my parents' attention because they're always on their device. Question? All right. Keep asking those questions. Okay. I promised on social media in our advertising, what's the number one rule for raising children? Don't. Okay. Raise adults. Yeah. That's a trick question, just trying to get people to come. Anyway, the next thing, and seriously though, back to this one. in the military, we had so many guys who just would not grow up. They destroyed their marriages, destroyed their families, just they couldn't handle adulthood, and that's just not good. We need to continually be reminded that we are raising kingdom warriors, that we're not raising children. So we can surely have a youthful spirit, and that's fun, but let's do that. A few tips on parenting together. These are things from Anita, from several of our friends, things we've learned over the years, and in general, we want to present a united front. In other words, we want to parent together. This becomes a big problem sometimes whenever someone comes to a therapist or a counselor and says, oh, my child is having a problem. And then you start talking, they start talking to the child, and the child's going, well, mom says this, and then dad gives me this. In other words, they're working against each other. And what this is, once again, this is a case where God is still parenting the parents. And whenever these issues coming up, we need to make sure that we're adult enough to learn these things. In other words, literally have had, heard of stories where, kid is dating someone, the mom is saying, okay, you keep things above board, don't get physically intimate, and the dad is handing him condoms on the side. Going, okay, so we really need to be together on this. We need to make sure that we're communicating and talking. If we're not having a good relationship, it's probably going to show in the kids. Once again, it's not going to be perfect. Make sure that it's not unusual. I know that in our relationship, I'm the easy parent, and Anita was more of the disciplinarian, and so there's always going to be some disagreements on how things should be done. And so, once again, need to be able to talk things through. And if you have a people pleaser in there like I was, I may agree with you and then resent you for the fact that I agreed with you. It's part of that growing process with God. Once again, don't structure your family as child-centered. One of the things that almost everyone is agreeing on right now in terms of studying this, from secular atheists all the way down to Christians, is that our young people don't have enough unstructured time to explore, to be who they need to be, to relax, everything. I mean, there's so many extracurricular activities. There's so much of their life is just, you are directed by adults all the time. And how are you going to learn to be an adult if you don't have the time to get out there and step into the adult world? How are we going to process everything that's happening to us if we never have time to think, if we're always running? And I was one of the things that my wife, Anita, did that was so beautiful was she told our kids, choose one thing, okay? We got school to do, and we've got family, and we've got church, okay? You can choose a music lesson, or you can choose a sport, but we're not going to be running all week long. You need to have time where their time is not packed, and you don't need to be running crazy either. Got another question that just came in. This is good. Coming from a young adult, I don't believe that it's necessarily pain that keeps us on the phone. We grew up with it, and for me and most people I know, it's just kind of for boredom. Very possibly. I know for me, one of the frustrations that led me to getting this under control was just that whenever I look at my schedule, and I have what I call white time on my schedule. It's when I'm not scheduled, and I can go, wow, I can get all this stuff done. I can maybe go visit my sister or my mom, and I can call my friends, and I can get this stuff done at the house. I can go on a date with my wife. I can get together with my kids. And the next thing you know, the whole week that had all this white time on it, unscheduled time, is gone, and you're going, what happened? And it was this. Sometimes it is just a plain old distraction. And a resource that I can recommend, if you're just struggling with this because it's kind of a habit and it's not some sort of past pain that's drawing you to it, it's a book called Indistractable by Nir Eyal. His last name is spelled Eyal, and his first name is Nir. And just talking about developing the ability to prioritize your use of everything so that you don't find your life just frittered away by technology. So, very good point. Oh, this is so important. Support and encourage one another. One of the not everyone can pull this off. God arranged it for us and our family, is that When we first started having children, I had a part-time job with the Air National Guard, and Anita had the full-time job as a nurse. So she had our benefits and better pay and more predictable pay. So I spent a lot of time at home with our baby girl, and she was working full-time, and I just worked part-time. And so I would do that, get up in the morning, help her get off to work, and then take care of this child, take care of the house, go to appointments all day long. And then she would come home at night, and she's exhausted, and I'm just fresh as a daisy, and we just keep going. Did it for weeks, months, years. I mean, probably about a year, maybe at the most. And it was illuminating, and it helped me to understand her world, and especially the night when I had struggled with this one-year-old girl all day long, and had spent the day running about, doing the shopping, taking care of this girl, and cleaning, and then by the time Anita got there, the house was a wreck again, and she came in and she went, "What have you been doing all day?" I just kind of grabbed the keys and went, "I got to go to Kroger's." And she's like, "What do you got to get?" I'm going, "I don't know, but I'll be back in a bit." Oh, I was furious, you know. If you can't do that literally, step into the other person's world, you know, and make sure you understand that it may not look like much to you, but it's much. I've heard from a lot of pilots, you know, they'll say they get off of a 12-day trip flying airplanes, and their wife goes, "We've just been sitting the whole time." Well, one of the great things, too, is Anita was in the military, and she used to fly missions on C-130s, and she would go out to work and fly those 2-hour missions and come home and collapse on the bed and sleep for 2 or 3 hours. So whenever I come home, she doesn't go, "Oh, you've just been sitting the whole time." Man, it's extensive mental work. It's the pressure changes. It just wears you out. So in other words, make sure you appreciate and understand what your partner's going through and give them a break. Take care of them. Every now and then, make sure that they can go out and blow off some steam. You know, give them a sabbatical, a 1-day sabbatical or a 7-hour or whatever. You know, you take all the kids, you know, put them out there, let them get some air. So that they don't go crazy. You got to really keep encouraging each other, and also make sure, and this is so important as well, is make sure that you keep your relationship. If you are blessed to still have, you're not single parenting here, keep your relationship going. You know, it's hard, and kids seem to demand your attention so much, but you got to invest in each other. You know, and this, we talked about last week about what love is in terms of, that's what I actually call the hard love definition. It's doing what's in the best interest of another person, regardless of how you feel or how they respond. But there's also this proactive kind of nurturing love, which is seeking to understand what speaks love to your spouse and doing it for them without being asked. In other words, you got a wife at home, if she's taking care of the baby all the time and taking care of the house, you know, what would speak love to her? It may be something small, you know, but do things to nurture your relationship, make time for each other, so because someday the kids are going to go on off and you're still going to be there, and you need to be able to get along together. Some resources that really help. We love the course Love and Respect. Men and women need some different things. Women need love, men need respect. It's by Emerson Eggerichs. We've had the video here before, but it's a great resource. We have the video available if you want to watch it on your own. Some encouraging resources. Focus on the Family has an app that has a lot of family-related topics that can really keep you focused. You can listen to it while you're doing things around the house. A lot of other biblical speakers have that as well. One of the things that was really, our kids really remember, and you can do this, it's so great, is to do read-alouds with your children. And our kids like this even into their teen years. You know, it's one of the things that I was able to do after work sometimes, is that I remember one of the last things we did before Rachel left the house is sat down with all 3 girls and read through the Chronicles of Narnia series. It's just a great time just to spend together and to improve your parenting, your bonding, and give things together. So reading aloud, and just fantastic. We're already kind of getting into, we've hit the tech issues already a bit, but let's talk about a few of these things. One of the questions that comes up a lot is, what age should I give my child a smartphone? I used to say never. Let them buy it themselves. this is along the same lines as it's a great Christmas gift, but you don't necessarily appreciate what you get cheaply. Looking back on my own experience, my parents did give me a lot of freedom. And one of the things that I did, my dad started me into a little photography business. I was able to earn money, and I was able to pay for my own flying lessons. The one thing that my parents did, they gave me a car for free, and they paid for my insurance. I kind of wish they hadn't done that. I wish they had made me pay for my own insurance. Probably a good time to give your kids a cell phone is when they start driving of some sort. It's a good safety thing. Maybe you want to do it before then, because what I'm hearing now is kids are getting them younger and younger. And of course, if you don't give them until then, you may end up in a lot of conflict with your child over that. So once again, you're going to have to help them walk through this and see how to handle this. So you're going to have some rules or agreements. Another good rule to have is something that we've used even with adults in our house is you use your devices in a common area. You don't go into your room and use them. You don't close the door and use them. And if you were here for Joe DeWeese's series, he did such a good idea, but there's a number of things that I think that we as parents and children can agree upon that we do need as parents to protect our children from harm on the internet. And so that's perfectly right to have accountability in those areas. And so I know that sometimes which app you can use is a big issue. And I've always said I don't personally like Snapchat because if I'm using it, I'm not accountable. You know, I mean, I can hand anyone my phone here today. If you need to borrow it, you're welcome. You can go anywhere. You can see my history. I don't delete my history. It's all an open book. And anyone should be able to do that in a family. If there shouldn't be anything to hide here. So any app that hides what you're doing, you know, and Snapchat is one of those that was designed to allow young men in college to pass nude pictures without their parents knowing about it. And of course, although everything theoretically disappears, you can save it, you can do a screenshot and save it into a vault program, and your parents won't even know it's there. If you're seeking to avoid accountability, that's a big spiritual issue. So any app that kind of takes you in that direction is not good. You need to be accountable. And so if that helps you as a parent, it's a good thing to consider. Well, I don't think there's any more questions coming in. If you got any last ones, please ask them. But the one thing that I would really encourage you to do if you're a parent right now is, once again, just going back to the very start, parenting was tough, but I look back on it and I'm so thankful that God allowed me to be a parent. I love my children, and I have so many great memories, but also I grew spiritually. God was parenting me through the process. He was parenting both of us through the process. And to a certain extent, I'm still learning from it with my adult children and the things that we watch them go through. And so I think it is so helpful sometimes to not think in terms of what I wanted from parenting or what I want people to think about me, but rather what did God want from that process. And that praying through the Lord's Prayer, it is so adaptable to every situation that you're in, whether if you're a teacher, whether if you're a parent, whether if you're a leader in a leadership position. You can just go before God and think about, once again, hey, we're all in this together. Parents and children, husbands and wives, we're all brothers and sisters. We're at different phases of life. So once again, really appreciate these opportunities and just know that they're hard. Kind of like the story of David Farragut. It's hard to imagine doing what he did at his age, but he did it. And when a lot of us who are older, I know, can share that some of those hard moments were the defining moments where we grew more than anything. We talked about suffering this morning in class and how important suffering is for us to learn to grow spiritually. And then we rarely grow without suffering. So it's going to be part of the plan that things are not going to go smoothly when you're parenting, but it's all good, And once again, tech is a big issue, I think, and primarily we just need to help young people, and we need ourselves to learn how to manage this. It's here to stay. I'm not against it. I travel with 3 Apple devices. I've got all 3 of them here tonight. And I love them. I don't want to go back. But there was a point at which it was really helping my relationship with Anita be less than it could be. And I'm sure it was a distraction from the father that I could have been for my kids sometimes, because it was definitely something that was too big in my life, and it was too big in their life, and so we really missed a lot of opportunities to connect and spend time together because of that. So we've got to learn how to control all of this. And, we didn't really spend a lot of time talking about the single parenting thing. I respect single parents. It is such a hard thing. It's hard to do parenting when you've got two people. And bless you if you're on your own. But do remember that you are parenting with God and you have a church family that can help you out. And just don't be afraid to ask for help, man. It's hard. And sometimes you got to have a break. Anyway, we have no further questions, no funny comments. Very disappointed. Hey, thank you for being here, and thank you for your kind attention. And as we think about this journey through life of coming from, being a child, my earliest recollections of being a child in my parents' house, and now towards the latter end of life, my children are adults and kind of in that age where at some point they may start having their own kids. Some of you are past that. God is faithful. We don't always understand what He's doing at the time, but He is always good and He is always faithful. I don't know how people do this without God. I just don't know how we survive this. And so if you are not right with God tonight, as is our tradition, we're going to have an invitation song here. And this is a great time to be baptized into Christ, to start a new life. Or if you need the prayers of the congregation, this is a great time to do it as well. Please come as Steve leads us.